2025 has finally come to a close. It's been a fantastic year for gaming, but we aren't quite done yet. Last week I ranked every single 2025 game that I played this year, of which I believe there were 38, but today is something even bigger. This is me ranking every single game I played, regardless of the year it released. All 60 something of them, so get comfortable, relax yourself, and join me as we rank every single game I played this year, starting with the stinkers. The worst game I've played this year by a decent distance is definitely FBC Firebreak. I love Remedy as much as the next guy, but this was a huge swing and a miss. The onboarding at launch was a complete disaster, the game tells you nothing and just shoves you into its shortest, most boring level. There is barely any content in the game, with the aim of the game being to replay the shorter levels on higher difficulties, which then makes them longer. Now, sometimes some cool stuff would happen in some of the levels, but the whole thing as a package just doesn't work, and I view it as a complete disaster. I absolutely love these types of choice and consequence games. I play every supermassive game. I've got almost 2,000 hours in Dead by Daylight. I'm quite literally the target audience for the casting of Frank Stone. But I still think it's awful. For a start, it absolutely wastes the DBD license. It's barely related at all, but the story is also just boring. Very, very few of the characters are likeable in any way, and miraculously, I think there's very little replay value. It might scratch an itch, but it's not a good game. All in Abyss Judge the Fate combines two things I really enjoy, poker and visual novels. Unfortunately, it doesn't do a good job with either. The writing is pretty poor and simple, I quite like the characterization of the main character, but the dialogue just always leaves a lot to be desired, and each chapter plays out in a very predictable way. The poker aspects also feel a bit scripted. Each boss is cheating, so the game consists of trying to figure out how they're cheating and using that to exploit them. The game just doesn't really do anything well enough to be enjoyable. The first of two skateboarding games on the list is the return of the iconic Skate franchise. I played an unhealthy amount of Skate 3 when I was younger, so I was a little bit excited for this, but for lack of better wording, I hated it. It is a free-to-play live service skate game. I don't think I actually need to say anything else. There's no story, it's just completing challenges in an empty, soulless world. The tone of the game is just so corporate, and the art style is really uninspired. However, the actual skating can be quite fun at times, it's just trapped in an awful game. I was quite excited for Splitgate 2, but boy was this a disaster. From the Make FPS Great Again fiasco, the pointless Battle Royale mode, and the disgustingly poor progression, Splitgate 2 seemed like a culmination of poor decisions. I actually found the core moment-to-moment gameplay quite fun, but after the first few weeks of playing, the game just did nothing to make me want to keep playing. The maps were visually uninspired, the class system didn't fit the game, and the microtransactions were just dreadful. Splitgate 2 was an all-round mess. I don't seem to be as high on this game as everyone else seems to be, but I can definitely acknowledge that there is still fun to be had. When the game wants to be a skating game, it's awesome, but that's kind of the point. It wants you to chase that feeling of skating and be unfulfilled when you don't get as much as you want. That is the point of the game. You've got these stages with interesting visuals and a brilliant soundtrack, the gameplay is smooth enough and pulling off tricks feels fun, but the issue is everything else. It spends too much time on its story, which is simply awful and very poorly written dialogue-wise, and definitely too much time walking around, not skateboarding. If the game was purely the skating sections, I think I would have enjoyed it a lot more, but that was clearly not the vision they had for the game. Putting Atomfall this low down actually feels quite harsh, especially now I'm realising that there is a lot of 2025 games this low down, but trust me, there's also a lot at the top as well. But anyway, back to Atomfall. It's actually heavily inspired by the area I live in the north of England, so I was intrigued by the game, but unfortunately the structure is just too open-ended for my taste. It gives you no direction, it's just exploring and finding your route through the game however you do so naturally. Now that is not bad on its own, it's just not the type of game I really enjoy too much. I found the combat to be extremely boring and the story a real letdown. It's also one of many 2025 games that just randomly ends, which is a theme you will see continue as we go up. Again, another 2025 game, but trust me, we'll get to other games soon. Many will see Mind's Eye not being at the actual bottom of the list and be quite angry, but if you hear me out, I actually don't think Mind's Eye was as bad as that. I actually did have some fun playing the game. Don't get me wrong, it is bad, but I was seemingly the only person on launch to play the game and have very few bugs. I thought the combat was extremely simple and lacking a lot of basic features, but I didn't think it was awful. The story I actually found quite interesting at the start, but it does eventually become very tedious, and this is yet another game in 2025 that just randomly ends. You will notice that this is a very annoying 2025 trend. Mind's Eye was one of the worst games I played this year, I just don't think it was the worst. For the first time in a while, we now have a game that wasn't a 2025 release, and that's Copycat. I actually had a bit of fun with it, but it's not great. You play as a cat who goes outside and then gets replaced by an identical cat, forcing you to live as a stray. The game actually explores some pretty heavy themes, but subject matter aside, the game doesn't do anything else well. The gameplay is extremely clunky, the voice acting is funnily bad. There are worse ways you could spend 3 or 4 hours, I guess, but I still don't think it's really worth visiting. A Quiet Place: The Road Ahead is pretty much what you would expect from a Quiet Place horror game, but then nothing more than that. It is a very generic horror game where you can't fight back and you just walk very slowly to not make noise. That's pretty much it. However, you can bang into absolutely everything as long as it's not covered in paint. Each area has an interesting enough gimmick, but nothing worthy of note really. The story is very basic, but it does its job. If the idea of playing a Quiet Place horror game sounds fun, then this is pretty much exactly what you'd expect it to be, but it will not exceed your expectations in any way. Now, don't panic, this is the only typical sports game on the list. I wouldn't usually add it, but I did spend a lot of time playing this game, so I feel like I kind of have to add it, but we'll be very quick here. The truth is, I'm one of those really boring people that loves cricket, but sadly, we don't actually have any good cricket games, and this is also one of those games that is not very good. However, I did enjoy playing the game against friends, but the game itself is not great, the animations are poor, it's bugs galore, I don't really know what I play it for. Incredible rapping ability aside, it's just a nice way of scratching the cricket itch. However, I haven't really played the recently released Cricket 26 either. This Bed We Made is a choice and consequence game in the ilk of Life is Strange, where you work at a hotel in the 50s. Your character is a Snoopy Susan who goes through guest belongings because she's rude and suddenly enters a room to find pictures of her doing it. Hence, the mystery then unfolds. The concept sounds a lot more interesting than the game itself. It never feels as tense as it probably should, and I didn't find any of the characters particularly interesting. Black Ops 7 was a huge failure in my eyes. As someone who genuinely enjoyed Black Ops 6, I feel like this is a real step back. The multiplayer is perfectly competent, but it just feels like an inferior version of the last COD. The zombies is fun enough, but I honestly think I've just aged out of the mode. But the real reason the game is here is the campaign. What the hell is this? I played through the whole thing because I hate myself, and it's just awful. It tried to prey on your Black Ops 2 nostalgia, and fails miserably. It pops you in Warzone maps and tells you to shoot stuff. It's just not a good game at all. Coffee Talk is actually really good at what it sets out to do, but I can't put it too high on the list because it doesn't really do a great deal. You run a coffee shop in a fantasy world and just listen to the problems of your regulars. It's good at that, the characters are really interesting, and watching them get over their problems is quite nice. It's got a chill soundtrack and a good flow, but unfortunately that's just kind of it. If that sounds fun, then you will enjoy it. Just don't expect anything else. High on Life is a perfectly fine first-person shooter that lives and dies by its humour. Honestly, if I hadn't wrote the game down like I do for every game after I beat them because I know I'm going to be doing a ranking at the end of the year, I probably would have forgotten I actually played it. It's a similar style of comedy to Rick and Morty, and it's constant. I don't mind that humour at all, but even I have to admit by the end of the game I was sick of it. The shooting mechanics are generally fine, it's nothing groundbreaking. The game is a decent enough few hours to kill some time, but I don't think it's really worth anything more than that. There were moments during my playthrough of Avowed where I saw the vision. Utilising a magic build was fun, some of the areas looked quite nice, but the whole thing just felt so surface level and devoid of a soul. The game feels so restrained in almost every way. Almost every character in this game is just boring and forgettable, has some of the worst companions I've ever seen in an RPG, and whilst the combat was fun at times, it becomes extremely repetitive pretty quickly. This is also another 2025 game, by the way, that just suddenly ends. Being this low does feel a bit harsh on Avowed, but the truth is that I just played so many brilliant games this year, including another Obsidian game much higher up the list. I've never actually played a Diablo game before, and if I'm being perfectly honest, I don't think I will again. This genre just doesn't seem to be for me, but I thought I'd give this one a try, and I thought it was fun enough. I can see how the combat could dominate someone's life for hundreds of hours. I can see how the world could absorb you within it. It just didn't fully click with me, but I did finish the campaign, so it clearly did something right to make me stick around for that long. I played a decent chunk of Delta Force this year, but only really to scratch that Battlefield itch before Battlefield 6 released, which, spoiler alert, is a lot higher up the list than this. Delta Force was pretty fun, but it also just sort of feels like Battlefield from Wish. It does have a sort of what's the word? Like an extraction shooter mode, but I didn't actually play that. I found the game perfectly competent, and it filled a gap for me for a month or so, but there's not really too much to say. On to the next. I honestly thought Indica would be a lot better than it was. I did really like the story, I thought the themes were brilliant, it's got some stunning visuals at times as well, but I thought the gameplay was really boring. Now, hear me out, gameplay isn't the main component of a game like this, and you will find games with more limited mechanics much higher on the list, but I don't think Indica's other elements did enough to offset that. The game just didn't stick with me, which is a shame, but I still don't think it's a bad game. As someone that has played every single Assassin's Creed multiple times, I think unless the series goes through a serious change in the formula, Shadows may well be my last one. Shadows was definitely fun in moments. Playing as NieR feels smooth, slipping through strongholds, assassinating people is fun, but unfortunately I hated almost every minute I spent playing as Yasuke. I quite liked his story and character, I didn't mind that stuff at all, but his brute force combat style just wasn't what I wanted from an Assassin's Creed game. And whilst the world is gorgeous, the mission design is painfully bland and uninspired after the first few hours. And this is also another 2025 game that just suddenly ends. I am tired. Every game from here on out I can confidently claim was a game that I enjoyed. We have officially got the stinkers out of the way. High five everyone. And I was actually looking forward to Keeper for quite a while, and I did enjoy it. However, I don't see it as this like sort of incredible game that I see a lot of people that have played it think it is. The puzzles are outrageously simple, and I don't think the story did anything special. With that said, it is a visual spectacle, it looks beautiful at times, and the art direction is fantastic, and I do think the gameplay evolves and becomes much more interesting in the latter half of the game. I didn't expect too much from the Precinct, but I was actually left pleasantly surprised. It is essentially a police simulator where you set out on your shift and do police stuff. Everything from dishing out parking tickets to chasing robbers to following high-speed pursuits via helicopter. There is a story going on, but it's not really memorable and it's extremely cliche. There's some gangs you're trying to take down and there's a serial killer on the loose. It sounds a lot more interesting than it is, I promise. The driving is also horrendously bad. Still, if you wanted 10 to 15 hours of police work, then the Precinct does give you that. Now, this is going to be a controversial one for a couple of reasons. The first is this is a highly rated game, incredibly low down in the list, and also because of a game that's a few places higher. However, the game just didn't really click with me. It is a weird one because I actually did enjoy Fallen Order, and don't get me wrong, I still enjoyed this as well, but at no point did the game really sink its hooks into me. The story was pretty good, it had some good emotional moments, the spectacle is brilliant, the set pieces, of course, wow, the combat is flashy and functional, and exploring the world was fun. The game doesn't really do a great deal wrong in all honesty, I just didn't enjoy it as much as I thought I would. Karma is such a strange game to discuss. Technically this is a psychological horror game, but I think it's more of a visual spectacle told in the form of a walking sim. It does have some chase sequences, although they're pretty much just walking forwards. It does have some puzzles, but they're incredibly simple. The true value for me comes from how the game uses visuals to explore its themes. It is heavily inspired by 1984 and other dystopian media. It's a really difficult game to recommend because it's not very long, it doesn't do anything special from a gameplay standpoint, but it was a very interesting experience and one I'm definitely glad I played. Now, the only reason that The Forest is this high up the list is because I played this game in co-op. If I had played this game solo, it probably wouldn't have even been on the list because I don't think I'd have finished it. But in co-op, this game was a blast. Building a base, exploring caves, fighting cannibals, finishing the story. I had an absolute blast doing all of this with my friend. The Forest probably deserves to be much lower because it's incredibly janky and it's quite limited, and I don't think it does a great deal right. But I'm going to base this ranking on how much I enjoyed the games. If I'm going to do that, then I have to put it here. This is probably the most volatile game on the list, in the sense that depending on my mood, it could be much higher or much lower. 1000 X Resist is the most inconvenient game I played all year. Its gameplay is janky, its navigation is some of the worst I've ever seen in a video game. I spent so long lost in this game. Its story is convoluted and its visuals are pretty poor. But whilst the story is convoluted, it is so good if you allow yourself to be completely absorbed by it. Whilst it is a bunch of nonsense, it's profound nonsense. It tells an important story, and at times it tells it well, but your enjoyment of it depends entirely on how much you can cope with the inconveniences it places in front of you. South of Midnight made me realise that I miss playing games like South of Midnight. The art style has this stop motion inspired look that I really enjoyed, the soundtrack really gets the Deep South vibe, and the story I thought was really human with some interesting characters and some good dialogue. The only place the game falls short is the combat. It's so boring and repetitive that the game actually even lets you turn it off in the settings. Still, I love the experience. I don't think we get many games like this anymore. Okay, so here's the controversial one, right? Having Outlaws above Jedi Survivor is probably a bit crazy, but please just hear me out and let me explain myself. I absolutely loved Clair. I thought she had a great personality, and her character development I thought was really nice. I thought the combat was serviceable enough, and I was just really engaged with the story. I thought the worlds were simply gorgeous, and didn't feel like typical Ubisoft slop at all. But the real show stealer here is undoubtedly Sabacc. I played so much of this game. Maybe I have a card game problem, who knows, but I would play this standalone. If there is a standalone Sabacc game and I've missed it, I will hit the roof. I always struggle with putting multiplayer games in these sort of lists because I never really know where to put them, but I've decided to put Rematch here because whilst I think the game has an absurd amount of issues and I'm very worried for its future, I cannot ignore the fun that I did have with the game. It is an arcade style football game and I just found it so fun around release. Unfortunately, the players keep dwindling following an inconsistent netcode and bug fixes simply taking too long. The majority of the player base spamming exploitable tactics instead of playing how the game was intended also doesn't help, but still, the game is so much fun, it really scratches an itch for me, and I'm really glad that I got to have my fun with the game, regardless of where it goes from here. Silent Hill F has a lot going for it, but ultimately fell this far down the list due to its insistence on overusing its worst element. The story is really interesting. You play as Hinako, who goes for a walk through a village before it becomes very clear that something is seriously wrong. The story is really interesting and incredibly tragic, especially in repeat runs, which are absolutely necessary in order to get the full picture. The visuals are also gorgeous at times. Unfortunately, the combat is atrocious. This is normal for horror games, especially Silent Hill, but the game consistently puts you in unskippable combat gauntlets, and making you go through it multiple times for the true story is simply just evil. I am a massive fan of the Little Nightmares series, but with the original team not being involved for this one, I was a little bit wary. What we got was pretty much what I expected, a worse version of the games we'd gotten before. Little Nightmares 3 is still a fun game with some haunting environments and chase sequences, and that feeling of being tiny in an enormous world. With that said, it is very clear that a little bit of soul has been lost here. It does feel like an imitation of the formula rather than an evolution. I'd somehow never actually played the Stanley Parable before, and I think I might be actually a little harsh in putting it this low on the list. You know what this game is already, so I won't spend too much time on it. It is very satirical, it's a meta-narrative, I found it constantly funny, and grabbing all the endings was a real joy. An iconic game, no doubt. I just played a lot of great games this year. Placing Lost Records on a list like this is so difficult. For the record, this game has a truly abysmal ending. It sequel baits, it's yet another game that just ends, it rushes its character development, it's got a terrible ending, okay? It also struggles heavily with its pacing, but with that said, I just love playing through the game. It is a game about friendship, about nostalgia, about clinging to our fondest memories for as long as we can, as fleeting as they may be. I absolutely do view Lost Records as a game of missed potential, but I just really enjoyed the vibe. The music, the visuals, it just worked for me, but I do still need to acknowledge that it is a deeply flawed game. I feel like maybe I've actually been a little harsh on Doom the Dark Ages simply due to the fact that it's not as good as Doom Eternal, but then again, not many first-person shooters are. The game takes things to a medieval setting, which isn't something that greatly interests me, but the moment-to-moment gameplay is still pretty damn fun. It's heavily based on your shield, as you can use it to zip around the arenas, and it genuinely is just really fun. Doom the Dark Ages is great when it wants to be a Doom game. There are truly awful dragon sections, there are the truly awful mech sections, but when the game remembers where Doom shines best in its tight spaces and its unrelenting chaos, it shines pretty damn bright. I was pleasantly surprised by Under the Waves. It's a pretty vibey, atmospheric game where you leave your life behind to go do some underwater work and live in a tiny pod in the middle of the ocean. It's pretty light on gameplay, with it mostly just being driving your little submarine thing around. There's tons of wildlife just swimming around, and it's just fun to be in the ocean. But the story is what really has this game this high up the list for me. I don't really want to spoil anything, but the more that you learn about your character's backstory and why he's decided to take this job, it made me quite emotional by the end of the game. Sword of the Sea is a strange game to recommend because you really need to be into these type of games. There is very little gameplay. The experience is hinged more on the spectacle of the visuals and the movement mechanics. It is a short game, but it was an experience I really enjoyed. It's not going to be for everybody as there's not too much going on, but I just love the visuals and everything else. I thought this was a really good time. I am a sucker for the Mafia series, and they definitely sucked me back in with this one. It's not a perfect Mafia experience, but I did love it, as it fills that hole for a 10-ish hour, linear, narrative-focused game that I always enjoy playing through. The story is a pretty by-the-numbers rise and fall through the Mafia, but the characters you run into along the way are the real heartbeat. Luca is one of the best characters in the series, in my opinion. I thought the Don was brilliant. It was just nice to spend time with these characters. I do think there are issues though. The gameplay is extremely stripped back and simple, which doesn't bother me too much, but I feel they could have done a bit more, and I also feel that the third act is quite rushed, but still, I feel it has a lot going for it, and I enjoyed it overall. I genuinely think there are only two things that stop Chronos from being an all-timer of a survival horror game. The story doesn't work for me, and I think it's about 5 hours too long. The combat is brilliant. It toes the line between survival and action horror brilliantly. It was the absolute highlight of the experience. The level design is also just brilliant. It's true survival horror in this aspect, with you searching for keys and methods of progression whilst picking up upgrades along the way. The visuals are also quality. It's a truly beautiful game when it wants to be. I sadly also feel like the story isn't told very well. It begins with mystery, but it eventually evolves into a story that feels too human for the characterization of its cast. I don't think it fits. It also drags a little towards the end. This game didn't need to be 17 or 18 hours long. Still, one of the best horror experiences of the last couple of years, no doubt. I am a Yakuza superfan. I am a massive nerd for this series, and I think I got the plat for this one in about 3 days. This is far from a top tier Yakuza experience, but it is a great way to scratch that itch. The story is pretty dumb. Majima gets amnesia and decides to become a pirate. Then there's a conspiracy and whatnot. It's generally nonsense, but it's entertaining. It was awesome being back in Hawaii. I hope the series continues to use this setting in future entries. The combat styles are really fun. The mini games are awesome. The only real drawback is that the pirate stuff is pretty naff. It's really scaled back and repetitive after you've done it for an hour or two, which for a pirate game is a bit of a letdown. I held no particular affinity towards the first Outer Worlds. I thought it was fine. I generally feel the same way about this one, but I can't deny that it is an improvement. The worlds feel bigger, the way the game reacts to how you play the game is admirable, and the floor system is an awesome gimmick. Unfortunately, I feel the biggest issue with this game is its characters are all really boring, and I don't think the story does a lot of interesting stuff, but still, I did have a lot of fun playing through this game. I'd had my eye on Pacific Drive for quite a while, but only got around to playing it this year, and wow, what a game. It is a survival game where you drive a car. You should be sold already. You explore this strange place infested with anomalies that do funky stuff to your car. Some will just turn your wipers on or steer the car, others will steal your stuff, some will steal your car. The aim of the game is to go on runs to collect resources for upgrades to your car and base, and also to progress the story, which I actually thought was quite good with some decent voice acting. It's got a brilliant vibe and atmosphere to it. If you enjoy survival games, then I really think you need to play Pacific Drive. Whilst Dark Raiders didn't hit quite as hard for me as it seems to have done for everybody else on the planet, there is still no denying it is a great game. The extraction shooter loop of looting stuff, killing robots, possibly killing other people, or forcing alliances, then leaving is just a really fun one. It feels tense and rewarding at the same time, but what really sets the game apart for me is the sense of community. I've been in games where I've helped other players, or other players have helped me, when there was just no real reason to other than it's just nice. I think it's nice to see that gaming can bring people together sometimes, and can also do the opposite. Probably one of the biggest surprises for me that I played this year, Fear the Spotlight stole my heart. Something about the PS1 era aesthetic just really creeps me out, so I probably found this game scarier than it actually is. You play as two schoolgirls who sneak into school at night to use a Ouija board, because why the hell not, and things obviously go wrong. From there, the game is split into two sections, where you follow the separate events that unfold for the two girls. The game is very segmented in the sense that it's always very clear when you're actually in danger, and when you can relax and just soak in the atmosphere. It has some really great puzzles, and the story is really good. I definitely recommend this if you're a horror fan. I feel a bit weird putting Oblivion this low down because it's obviously an unbelievable classic, but I don't know. I'm looking at the games above this one and I just think I enjoyed them more. This was actually my first time playing through Oblivion, and I really enjoyed the game, and I can definitely tell why it's garnered the reputation it has. The world is an absolute joy to explore, and some of the side quests were simply fantastic. I thought the main quest was a surprising step up from Skyrim's as well. It's simply a must-play for fans of RPGs, but I'm sure most fans of RPGs have already played it. I really enjoyed Alan Wake 2, but I feel I do need to make clear that probably not as much as everyone else. I don't think Alan Wake 2 is this amazing must-play, but it's still a damn good game and the perfect advertisement for creative expression. A lot of the game is simple AAA survival horror stuff, but the game has a lot of unique quirks such as the FMV sections and whatnot. It is very atmospheric and it tells a brilliant story. Alan Wake 2 was a lot of fun, but leave those cheap jump scares at the door, please. I absolutely loved Borderlands 4, but I do need to make something clear. I'm not someone that's going to pour hundreds of hours into the end game content, so that's not how I'm ranking here. I'm ranking the actual game. I played through Borderlands 4 as an open world looter shooter. I finished the game and then I left it alone. That is how I'm ranking this game, and I loved it as that. The weapons were fun, the gunplay was outstanding, the world was exciting, the writing was actually funny for a change. I simply think if you treat this as a 30-40 hour open world game, then you'll really enjoy it. I have never played a game like Sayonara Wild Hearts, and I honestly doubt I probably ever will, and I love that. The game is so unique, essentially a hallucinogenic visual marvel, with an absurdly good soundtrack, one of the best I think I've ever heard in a game. The gameplay is constantly changing and evolving, and the art style, I don't think I even really need to say anything. Show, don't tell. Look at it. It also tells a pretty nice and uplifting story if you can pick up on its abstract methods. It's definitely on the shorter side, but it's utterly incredible and unique. If you can spare a few hours of your day to have your mind blown, then I can't recommend Sayonara Wild Hearts enough. I actually think Ghost of Your Time missed a chance to really innovate and develop this series into something special instead of giving us another open world checklist. Unfortunately, it didn't do that, but I still have to admit that as far as open world checklists go, they don't get much better than this. The combat has been improved from Tsushima, with the game now having multiple weapons instead of stances that work best against certain weapons the enemy could have. The world is of course gorgeous, if a little tedious to explore at times. The story is extremely predictable, but I do think it was interesting enough with some cool characters. It's just a shame it's a story, and a game really, that we've seen a dozen times before. I decided to replay Sleeping Dogs near the start of this year, and boy oh boy, what a banger. It is a crime we still don't have a sequel to this. You play as an undercover cop in the gang world of Hong Kong, and you have no idea who you can trust or where your true path lies. It is a brilliant story on its own, but the gameplay is where Sleeping Dogs shines best. The combat is so damn fun and interactive, with you learning new combos and being able to throw enemies into stuff or throw stuff into enemies. The world itself is also so much fun to explore and just live in. It's so immersive. I don't think as many people have played Sleeping Dogs as they actually should have done. The game is simply incredible. Now, you're probably going to see this game this high up and be confused, but all I'll say is, hear me out. Promise Mascot Agency is genuinely some of the most fun I've had with a game all year. You play as an ex-Yakuza forced to work at a mascot agency where you send these weird looking guys on jobs to earn money. The game is essentially a capitalist simulator where you're trying to maximise your profits to pay off a debt. But you also learn of a conspiracy in this small town you're operating in and attempt to get to the bottom of it. The gameplay is essentially just driving around and finding upgrades to your business, but there's also this deck builder element which is fun in bursts as well. The story is actually better than I expected, even if it is often pretty ridiculous. I genuinely can't really put into many more words why I love this game so much, but it is just 15 hours of pure unadulterated fun. Battlefield 6 dominated my life for a good few weeks this year. Battlefield is unquestionably back. The campaign was a major disappointment, and they're doing some funky stuff with the portal I don't agree with, but it also has a bit of dodgy progression. But the core multiplayer is brilliant. Playing each role really feels like it matters to the outcome of the overall fight, yet there's still that feeling that you're an insignificant cog in a giant machine of war. It's so cinematic, with brilliant visuals, incredible sound design, and amazing gunplay. I really loved playing Battlefield 6 this year. I swore I wouldn't become addicted to Ball XP, and unfortunately I lied. This game is utterly incredible from top to bottom. It is a roguelite where you send your little guys into the pit and shoot balls at enemies to try and reach the end and beat the final boss. then you use the materials you harvested and your blueprints you acquired to upgrade your base. It is a wonderfully satisfying loop that just never stops being fun. There's also loads of different characters that completely reshape the game, such as making it turn-based or having a character that chooses the upgrades for you. The variety is just off the charts, and so is the fun factor. One of the surprise packages of 2025 has definitely been the alters. The core concept alone is already doing a lot of heavy lifting. It's basically, what if your crew was made entirely of alternate versions of yourself? That is such a clever premise. You're stuck on this hostile alien planet, and what you do is you sort of clone yourself and make different versions of you that serve different functions because they made different choices throughout your life than you did, so they turned out differently. It's just incredible like that. It is a sort of base management survival game where you also need to consider the needs of the alternate yous. You can't just put them to work constantly because they'll get angry, they'll get annoyed, they can actually kill you if you're mean enough. So it's that kind of balance, and I think they get it really well. It tells a brilliant story. I think I blasted through the entire thing in 2 days. I genuinely just could not get enough of the alters. I think it's utterly ridiculous. I think Death Stranding 2 is a better game than the first, simply due to the fact that it's easier to play as a result of your struggle and experience with the first game. The first game made you suffer before it let you enjoy the traversal tools, but here you get a lot of that stuff pretty soon. But I also think that the story is slightly weaker. I think it's a lot less focused, and I think a lot of the characters feel more like ideas than people. But again, this is Kojima, so even when it stumbles in style. The weirdness is just off the charts in the best way. The man knows how to build a moment, even if it doesn't always work. Also, I would recommend not playing this game if you haven't played the first one, just because I think you will appreciate this one so much more if you've gone through the struggle of the first game. Metaphor was actually the very first game I played in 2025, and it set an incredibly high bar. I am a huge Persona nerd, so I was just all over this one. Metaphor takes the Persona formula and expands it from a school setting with a hidden world to a continent-wide epic, where you travel across the bloody continent attempting to kill a certain individual. I think that the gameplay was absolutely outstanding, with the front and back row stuff, the way you can build your party up, are all excellent. The story is also fantastic. I think these characters are all exceptional, and importantly, the villain is incredibly engaging to listen to. The world is also gorgeous, pretty much everywhere. I simply think this is a must-play for JRPG fans, or fans of turn-based games. Easily one of the best JRPGs that I've ever played. Balatro combines something I love daily with something I generally don't: poker with roguelikes. If you remember back at the start of the video when talking about All in Abyss, I said I love poker, and I do. I play it regularly, but I've never quite jived with roguelikes. I can count on one hand the amount I've actually enjoyed. But Balatro quite literally dominated my life this year. No matter what other brilliant game I was playing, I'd still squeeze some time in for Balatro. I always looked at the game and thought, there's just no way this game is as good as everyone says it is, and I was actually correct. It's better. If I hadn't played so many masterpieces this year, then this would be even higher on the list. It is definitely one of my favourite games, and one I imagine I will be playing for a very long time. If we're talking about pure co-op experiences, then I genuinely don't think there is a better one than Split Fiction. I know people will point to games such as It Takes Two, their previous work, or even older stuff like Portal 2, which is still a great game. But for me, I still think Split Fiction is just better. The level design is next level. Every single area feels handcrafted to make sure both players are doing something incredibly meaningful and not just helping each other out in a gimmicky way, but in an inventive way. The game constantly introduces mechanics, gets you used to them, and then subverts them, forcing you to remix them and use those same mechanics in a different way. It is incredible. The story, unfortunately, sucks. It features 2 writers getting trapped in their stories, with a big thing about AI and whatnot. I think it's AI anyway. It seems like it's kind of leaning onto that aspect of things, but still, I feel like they could have done a lot more with the story. And really, for me, the only thing keeping this from being unanimously crowned the GOAT of co-op games is nostalgia. Kill me if you must. I was incredibly excited for Dispatch, but even I did not expect it to end up this high on the list. The way this game plays with your emotions is simply not fair. It makes you care so deeply about all of its cast, and the incredible animation and top-tier voice work from the likes of Aaron Paul and Laura Bailey and many more do a lot of heavy lifting. It also boasts an incredible soundtrack that always managed to find the right vibe for the right scene and allow for the most important moments to stick in my mind possibly forever. It also helps that it just tells probably one of my favourite video game stories of all time. It simply is that good. I even like the gameplay, which definitely feels like a matter of personal taste, but still, Dispatch is unbelievable, and I think my first video of 2026 is going to be on it. Just about sneaking into the list with it being the final game I played in 2025, Red Dead Redemption is simply a classic. I decided to play this game for the third time with the release of this next gen version, and wow, every time I dive back into this world I am blown away. John's story is so exhilarating and tragic at the same time. It's filled with some, let's say, interesting characters. The shooting feels a little outdated for sure, but blowing heads off with Deadeye will never not be awesome, and just riding around the map on your horse is just so calming. The game is hardly picture perfect on the graphical side, but I'll be damned if this version didn't look gorgeous. Simply an all-timer of a game, and one I always enjoy revisiting every now and then. Feel free to strike me down if you must. This was my first ever time playing Metal Gear Solid 3. In fact, this is the first Metal Gear Solid game I've actually finished. But oh my god, it's awesome! The stealth gameplay is outrageously fun, I found the characters so interesting, the level design is a delight, the story is heart-wrenching, the game is simply just peak. I had an absolute blast playing through it. I had to put it this high on the list, I'm sorry. Let me be completely clear. Clair Obscur is one of the best games I have ever played. The only reason it is not at number 1 is because for some reason this year I decided to replay one of my actual top 3 favourite games ever after it. So that is the only reason. This game deserves to be number 1. I think it's absolutely incredible. I think everything about it just clicks. I think the story is borderline perfect. It's daring. It takes risks. I think it nails its landing. I think its characters are fantastic. I think the voice work is magnificent. The soundtrack, everything in that side of the game is amazing. The combat kind of depends a little bit. It is turn-based at its core with some real-time inputs sort of woven in, but I still think that this game is worth playing, even if you don't like turn-based combat, because I actually still think you will find a way to enjoy the combat. I think it really does a good job of sort of bridging the gap. But look, there isn't even a real caveat to it. I just think the game is an utter masterpiece. I think it deserved its sweep. Again, strike me down if you must. But the best game I played this year was definitely NieR Automata. Full disclosure, this was a replay. I did play the game back on release, and it's simply one of my favourite games ever. It tells a story so beautifully tragic, with a level of nuance and confidence that you just don't often see in video games, with some excellent characters and phenomenal voice work. The way the game is structured with the multiple endings is also genius, and works much better here than whatever they were going for with Silent Hill F. The combat is also hack and slash goodness. It's actually not one of my favourite genres, as you could probably tell from the rest of the list. I don't think there's many, if any, other hack and slash games on the list. But here, I just find it so fun, I don't know what it is. The world is also gorgeous with a beautiful art style. And I've always said that a distinct art style will always outlast graphical fidelity, and it's just as well because the graphics themselves here aren't that great. But still, to me, NieR Automata is at worst my third favourite game of all time, and definitely my favourite that I played in 2025. So that was every single game I played this year ranked. But before we round off 2025 for good, I just wanted to say a couple things. First of all, this video took a very long time to make, so if you did enjoy it, I would really appreciate a like on the video, as it really does help me out, and also a comment letting me know what you thought of the video, even if you didn't like it, would go a long way too, as I'd love to engage in conversation. Secondly, I wanted to thank anybody watching this for your support over the course of the year. Even if this is the first time you've ever seen one of my videos, I still thank you for watching the video, and I really hope you enjoyed it. I've had a ton of fun making weekly videos all year, and I'll be doing the same again in 2026. So if you enjoyed watching this video or any other video of mine, maybe a little subscribe wouldn't be the worst thing you could do. Regardless, that is all from me for 2025, and I will see you all in the new year. Have a nice day and a good new year, and goodbye.